Katrina, tell these guys that story with as much detail. Feel free to leave out any bits that you feel might be sensitive. That story about you had to go and see the bank, they were being unrighteous, and you did the craziest of crazy, and it turned out okay.
Yes, well, that banking story, I think you're meaning there was a bank involved, but there was also a receiver involved.
Yeah, that one.
And yeah, so in that circumstance, we had our major customer at one of our businesses went bankrupt, and receivers were appointed. So that's not always a good thing to know that the customer that's probably about 75% of your income has now been appointed into receivership. Now, thankfully, we're in the ag industry, so supplying grain to animals is always a thing that is considered to be an essential service. So I had the receivers contact me fairly quickly and talk to me about continuing to deal with me. Now, the way they do that is they put a sunset, basically they put a clause on any pre-appointment debt, and then anything past pre-appointment is then the receiver's liability, which is quite a safe way of continuing to deal as a business, because obviously the receivers were going to pay the bill and we could continue with this customer. And I also knew that the receivers would be trying to wind up the company, probably trying to sell the business. And ultimately, I needed to continue to be in the box seat in terms of being the essential service to this company, because when the company sold, obviously we needed to have our place in that company so that it would transfer across with the new owner. But as we were walking through it, I knew that we were fairly crippled with the amount that was owed to us. And not only were we crippled with the amount that we owed to us, it had actually matched a very large amount of money that we had distributed to Kingdom Work just prior to this problem happening. It's quite amazing how the numbers resembled each other so significantly. But so I knew that there was something up, of course, but I knew that there was something significant about the fact that we'd given something into the Kingdom Work, and then basically our entire year's profit was disappearing in a pre-appointment debt with the receiver. So it was a pretty hard situation, and the natural brain goes very, very hard when you're in this circumstance. But I was crying out to the Lord too, and he was speaking to me with so many words. And that's the other thing, in spiritual warfare, you need to get inside the word of the Lord. And that's what I found. Like Psalms 91 is a huge comfort when you're in a time of trouble. And, you know, I was reading that out, but there was many other words. And to make a long story short, through this, the Lord spoke to me and told me that he would deliver me and that he would ensure that we got all our money back. And of course, when you're dealing with a receiver, that really isn't a sort of thing that you would expect to happen. But in this circumstance, I felt that God was definitely speaking to me. So that gave me the courage and the confidence to actually stand on the word of the Lord and to play hardball with this receiver, providing this essential service to them, and negotiating the settlement of the pre-appointment debt before we'd continue to provide that service going forward. And it was pretty scary doing that. I was offered a quarter of what was owed to me in that process so that we could continue to deal. And just through it, I just knew that the Lord was telling me not to make an alliance or to make a natural decision to take what seemed to be the right thing, what seemed to be a good decision or a good outcome. I had lawyers and accountants telling me that that was the best outcome, that they've never seen such a good deal. Yet I knew that the Lord had said that he was going to pay it all back. And so I just stood with confidence and just decided that I wasn't going to cave. And to cut the long story short, what basically ended up happening is we entered into a deal that meant that every single cent got paid to us. And also throughout that process, the Lord also led us after we'd got through that process and basically got that agreement from the receivers. It was several months later that the Lord also led us through a process of purchasing the business that was in receivership. And that's a remarkable story because we had no money. We were owed a lot of money, but that wasn't enough to buy the business either. We had quite some financial difficulties. But when the word of the Lord speaks, it happens. And standing on that is the part that we need to do. And that is part of spiritual warfare too, standing on the word and not moving from it. So it was just an incredible story of how God advanced our family's business, and the banks made it very difficult for us to settle. But even there, we were able to just even surprise the banks and to surprise ourselves. And the Lord just helped walk us through it. And it's been one of the most exciting journeys I've had in my life. Challenging, probably the most challenging, but also the most exciting. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So guys, I want you to catch this, right? So they get a phone call one day that says their largest customer, 75% of their revenue, is going broke and the receivers are in. And so the receivers, these guys kind of get this sense, no, I want my money that you owe to me. And so they get offered 25 cents in the dollar, which I must say is an insane deal at the start. Most offers are 5 to 10 to maybe 12 cents in the dollar, right? Would be a standard kind of offer from these guys. You got given 25. So I can see why your advisors are like, take it. But you're going, nah, I'm not happy with that, right? My God's called me to more. I feel like he's saying stand. And so you actually said no to an offer and you ended up getting all of your money. Then through that, you end up purchasing that business, right? Which, I mean, it was making a loss, and then you've turned it around to making a substantial profit. I won't go into details, but you've done an amazing turnaround in that business. But you know what? That reminds me of the scripture where God gave that person talents, and the person that multiplied their talents were put over 10 cities. So the person that was given 1 talent, turned it into 10, was put over to 10 cities. Here you are being a good steward with the bit of money that you're fighting for, and the next thing you know, you end up with the ownership of this great company. And so, it blows my mind because it's a good story. It's a good story. I love it.